Hello and welcome to a special edition of Media Matters here on Anfield Index, coming to you live on YouTube. I'm your host, Eddie Gibbs, stepping in for Dave Davis, who's off enjoying some well-earned sunshine. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I've been part of Anfield Index family for many years, though I've mostly been working behind the scenes of late. But I'm back today and on the mic. And isn't it just typical? Dave gets to cover all these Liverpool victories. And first time I fill in this season, I'm talking about a loss. You've got to love the timing, haven't you? But all jokes aside, we've got plenty to unpack today. And joining me, as ever, on Media Matters on Monday is David Lynch, our trusted Liverpool reporter. And together, we're going to dive into that shock FA Cup defeat to Plymouth, the latest off-the-field news, and of course, we'll be looking ahead to the big one, the final Merseyside derby at Goodison Park, which is just 2 days away. And before we get started, a quick reminder that we do have Super Chat enabled now. So if you do have a chance to make a comment, please make a comment. If you have a chance to turn it into Super Chat, please do so, because every little helps the channel and it helps us keep delivering and improving the content that we offer right here on Anfield Index. So first and foremost, David, how are we?
Yeah, good. I am thinking about blaming you actually for this defeat with you stepping in. It can't be a coincidence that, but yeah, it's something different to get into, I suppose. And yeah, I'll be honest, I've got a very similar approach to Arne Slot to this in that I don't think he will have lost too much sleep over that one last night, to be honest.
Yeah, I did watch your video on your YouTube channel last night, and that was very much the flavor that you seem to be delivering there. That I think you kind of titled it perfectly. It was like I think you said that Slot will lose no sleep over it, and it's one of those that you know exactly what he was doing, and that kind of draws us to it. It was a strange game. I mean, for me, I think the Gomez injury was absolutely pivotal, and not because it was Joe Gomez, but because it meant Endo had to come out of midfield, and then suddenly that midfield was very, very lightweight, and not a midfield that Arne Slot would have wanted to ever have started. But he also mentioned afterwards, obviously, that Curtis Jones had been struggling. Had said to him that he probably would prefer not to play because he still felt a bit tight with his injury, and of course that restricted Slot's options even more so. So the poor performances, we'll get into all of that some of the senior players, obviously, they've taken the most flack, and rightly so, whereas the youngsters have had a bit of a pass again, and rightly so. But what were your impressions of that match?
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, about that early sub making a real difference, because I think throughout the rest of the game then, I mean, I thought Endo played well wherever he was during the game, really. I thought he had a decent game out of one of very few who was okay. But you lost a lot of bite and physicality in that midfield, and it looked for the remainder of the game kind of lightweight and inexperienced, which is exactly what it was, and that kind of set the tone then for the game, really. In that, you know, Liverpool were kind of bullied in that part of the pitch for much of it, and you know, they were struggling to get the ball forward regularly, struggling to progress it, and that was the tone of the match, really. And you know, I thought Plymouth defended really well, but equally they probably didn't have as much to do as they might have expected. It wasn't, you know, complete backs to the wall. There were a few challenges where they dive in and the centre half celebrating it, but you know, not as many as you would have hoped for a team who's bottom of the Championship. You would have liked Liverpool to test them more, but yeah, it was just so what you ended up with, I felt, was kind of almost a pretty even game decided by the penalty, which absolutely was a penalty, and Plymouth take their moment. And you know, the fact that you've gone away to the side that's rock bottom of the Championship and Liverpool are top of the Premier League and ended up with an even game and come out on the wrong side of that, that is obviously very disappointing. But equally, I think, you know, Arne Slot with his selection and then, you know, his substitutions and the amount of players he left at home, he's kind of accepted that this kind of thing could happen. And it did happen, and now he's got to kind of pick up the pieces from that and move on and hope to prove going forward that there are benefits to this.
Yeah, I see Hyla Mattis has put a comment in here, morning. What does this say about the depth in the squad and or the lack of quality in the youth side, and why only 3 subs even though Curtis Jones was unused? So I think the Curtis one, I mean, obviously you can only change a game. You can only break play. A manager only has 3 options to break a play, and he had to use that sub obviously in the first half with Gomez injured. So that did restrict his options. And I think he did answer afterwards why Curtis Jones wasn't used. Curtis wasn't used because he had told the manager he felt a bit tight. So he was almost a ceremonial substitution. There was no intent to use him. And I think people after the game were very much going along the lines of, well, he's not used Curtis by choice because he's saving his minutes, obviously, for Everton. And that may have been partially the case, but obviously the manager did address that afterwards. It was almost like he was trying to make a point, I think, David, that he didn't not used Curtis by choice. He would have used Curtis, and that would have probably been the sub rather than the Kane Doherty one, if that had been the option, because that would have given them that bit more control in midfield, which was the weakest area. It was depriving the forwards of service. It wasn't linking the backs, and it exposed so many flaws. And I think that's why Harvey Elliott in particular struggled, because whether people like it or not, he is a midfielder, but he's not a deep lying midfielder. And that was kind of, I mean, he was almost playing as a sweeper in the last 20 minutes. And it was like, that did obviously expose a lot of his flaws. So it's not, I feel sorry for him. You can't feel sorry for professional footballers in that situation. They should be able to adapt. But I think a lot of the cracks in Liverpool's side were exposed by how weak that midfield was. So in terms of the youth side, again, I'll let you tackle these points in a minute, David. But for me, the youth side, that is not the sort of game a youth side would play on a pitch like that against hardened. I mean, look at the passion that the likes of Maxi and Katic showed when they were in that defense. They knew exactly what they were doing. They're streetwise. These guys have been around the clock. That's not the sort of players that young boys are going to be up against. And that's why Liverpool send these guys out on loan, to develop these skills. And that was not an option for that game yesterday. They were thrown in. They were almost lambs to the slaughter. And like we're saying, like we made that point about Endo, because he didn't start he started midfield, but because he didn't stay in midfield, all of the balance was sucked out. And everything in these games is about balance. Do you agree, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on Curtis Jones in particular as well, I do wonder whether Slot might have used him if he wasn't a little bit concerned that there might be a bit of extra time coming. You know, say he got to the hour mark and he knew that, okay, there's only half an hour left. We're going straight to penalties here after this. I think he would have thrown him on. But it was just always the risk at any point in the game that, okay, I'm going to bring him on. He's going to end up actually playing 45 minutes, which I don't want to do if he is feeling a little bit of tightness. So that was always the concern. And I suspect that was the reason he wasn't used. And in terms of what it says about the squad depth, I mean, I've had a lot of comments about this because I'm a big advocate of this squad. For me, this is the strongest squad in the Premier League that Liverpool have got at the moment. I think it's underrated actually in terms of depth because of what happened last season and how bad the injuries were. Kind of an unprecedented injury crisis really for Liverpool there. I think people don't appreciate how good it is, but as good as your squad is, to be able to leave kind of 10 or 11 players at home, you are instantly weakening your squad. It doesn't mean that to have a strong squad is not to be able to say that you get the opportunity to leave 10 at home and not feel that in any way and not see that in terms of how strong your 11 is and how strong the bench is. You know, and as you say, that the balance of the side was really sort of compromised at parts of this game. And that, you know, I think the strongest areas Liverpool had in terms of the personnel they were able to put on the pitch were the forwards, but so many of the problems were getting the ball to the forwards in areas where they can do what they usually do. You know, Jota only ends up having one shot in the game, which is the one that's saved. That tells a story in itself. And Chiesa, I thought he didn't have a great game, but he's picking the ball up near the halfway line with 4 people to beat. I'm not really surprised that he was struggling, and that would not have been the issue if Liverpool were a little bit stronger and a bit more physical in midfield and had a bit more experience and quality there. So I just don't think we should read too much into kind of what this result and what this performance says. I think there were real issues with the balance of the side. And as I say, it was a tight game that, you know, outside of the penalty, you know, Liverpool could have themselves have ended up on the right side of winning it and having not played well at all. So yeah, I don't think it says much about the quality of Liverpool's depth, because you see your depth in moments where you may be changing 1 or 2 and bringing them in when there's an injury and bringing them into the first 11. It doesn't give you a right to completely wholesale changes, absolutely decimate your bench and think you can go anywhere and win. And I wouldn't be too harsh on the youngsters either, because, you know, Trey Naoni, I thought James McConnell had some bright moments, but there are kids being thrown in together, expected to form a partnership up against senior pros. It's very, very difficult. And so I really don't think we should read too much into the performances. And I don't think this is damning of Liverpool's squad depth at all.
Yeah, I suppose with hindsight, it's easy to say. And I think you nailed it in your video yesterday where you say that Slot knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, if he had any inkling that he wasn't, no one likes to lose a game. Let's qualify that. No one likes to lose a game. Klopp would have seen what happened at PSV a couple of weeks ago, and he thought, I have enough here. I have enough here to see off the bottom Championship side. It's going to, accept in all the mitigation of the points you just made about it's going to be disjointed. It's not going to be the free-flowing football. You're fielding guys that have never played together before and probably never will again. And I think I've got enough just about to get past this. And if I go out, we go out. But that's the way we went. Otherwise, The elephant in the room is the bench, because he would have took some of the seniors and packed that bench with them as a break glass, and he decided never to do that. And I'm not basing that on Curtis Jones not coming on. I'm saying you would take Mo Salah, you would take Cody Gakpo, you would take Ryan Gravenberch, you would take Alexis McAllister, you take Dominic Szoboszlai, you take Virgil van Dijk. Then what does that bench look like then? You know what I mean? He had that option and he decided not to do it. So I think when you say he knew exactly what he was doing, I don't think you mean he knew exactly what he was doing, and that he wanted to go out the FA Cup to free up the fixture list. I think he knew exactly what he was doing, and that Everton is everything to him. And that match on Wednesday night is everything in the planning here. And giving these boys a chance to have that rest, and then knowing what's coming after the Everton game, with the Wolves game, with the Villa game, with the City game. Liverpool accepted, let's not forget, Liverpool have accepted moving that Villa game into that slot. There was opportunities to move that later in the season when the fixture list might, if let's just say they get through the next round of the Champions League, the fixture list is going to pile up very, very quickly. So Liverpool have made that choice to actually not just make up their game in hand against Arsenal, but to play a game more than Arsenal with this Villa game, so that Arsenal will have a game in hand in Liverpool, because Liverpool, with almost a fully fit squad, are thinking to themselves, this is a chance to nail this league title.
Exactly that. I totally agree. This is it. Basically, the manager has made a big call in terms of what his squad will look like for this game, because he's been throwing up all the elements together and kind of made a calculation. And he knows, and he knew absolutely without doubt, that the consequence might be a poor performance and you might go out of this competition. He absolutely accepted that was how this game could go. But he had to make the call, and and this is what it is to be a manager, and you have to make these big calls sometimes. And it's not just pouring everything into Everton either. It's the fact that it's five games in 15 days. It's bigger than just the Everton game, which obviously in itself is extremely important, but it's that run that's coming up. So he had to make a decision on whether, he took the likes of Szoboszlai, Salah, Van Dijk along. He could have named a much stronger bench, but he accepted that this might happen. And I think you see it in his demeanour post-match. He doesn't seem too devastated. It's not a case of that he wanted to go out, or he likes losing, or he thinks, there are benefits to us going out, which, by the way, there are beyond this in terms of fixture congestion, generally speaking. But he took the risk, he took the gamble, and he knew there might be consequences, and he's fully accepting of those consequences and knew it could happen. So, you just hope now that the clear benefits of this, which is that, Liverpool can get through this run of 5 games in 15 days doing pretty well and keeping the performance levels high. And also then beyond that the fixture congestion isn't too bad in the latter part of the season. You hope that those benefits are now reaped, but it's just one of those that he had to make a decision doing this, and he accepted that Liverpool could play poorly and could go out, and that's exactly what happened.
We've got a comment on the screen here about Harvey Elliott's performance against PSV and Plymouth, and should we be worried about Harvey's future in this team, or was it just that he plays with a disjointed team and can't play his best game? Now, we'll come on to Harvey in a moment, but let's just ask David, Harvey mentioned in his interview after the game that there were some positives in terms of the youngsters getting some game time. If we expand that, you could say it was positive that Jota got 90 minutes into his legs. You know what I mean? He's going to need to be involved in the running. And there was a chance for Chiesa to play a full game. There wasn't many more positives, but one I would say is, again, with Tara Endo. I thought he was, if there was one bright spark for Liverpool yesterday, I think it was him. He is, that boy has got so much hunger for the fight, no matter what the situation. He'll go into battle for you. And I think that I really do hope he gets a chance. That's going to be one of the real downsides about going out this cup, that these guys on the fringes aren't going to see many more minutes. I just can't see where the minutes are going to come for. But I hope it's not the last we see of Wataru Endo, because I do think he's got a role to play. And Klopp was using him earlier in the season, bringing him on for those last 10 minutes to sort of sound up things, to keep the press of the opposition away from Liverpool's back line. And I do see a role for him there, David. I hope that we do see a bit more of Wataru Endo, even though the likes of Chiesa and perhaps Nunes, perhaps Diaz, they may see a bit less in terms of playing time in this next little spell than they might have imagined before this game.
Yeah, his attitude is absolutely phenomenal, really, because he's told at the start of the season or in pre-season by the manager, you're not going to be a big part of this. You're probably not my kind of player. I don't see a big role for you here. And that's when, the news came out about the interest in him and bids being put in by Marseille and other clubs who were kind of interested, a few German sides. And you just thought everything was pointing towards him leaving. And then, of course, when he actually doesn't leave, I just did not fancy his chances of getting many minutes at all. And I remember speaking to people in his camp, and they said, look, he's determined to stay and fight and prove the manager wrong and prove he can play a role in that squad, the squad. And I think what we've seen since is he's absolutely done that. I think he has made a point to the manager. I mean, he's not usurping Ryan Gravenberch for starts, and I don't think we should ever expect that. But I think he's showing that he can be relied upon for this manager, and I think he showed it in the game yesterday. He's such a battler, isn't he? His use of the ball is not terrible by any means, but he wins his challenges, gets around, and I thought he was really, really good. And the fact he can drop into central defence as well and play well there, he's just such a good option to have around the place. And I still don't think, even in this run, there's going to be starts for him coming up over the rest of the season, and that is a shame. But if you're 1-0 up at Goodison Park on Wednesday night, you need a sub to come on in the last 20 and just absolutely kill the game and ruin it as a spectacle, but make sure that game finishes 1-0. You would have no qualms whatsoever about him coming onto the pitch. And I don't think the manager would have any qualms about it too, which is a huge transformation from where he was at with the player at the start of this season. So that is huge credit to Endo. He's a brilliant professional, great attitude. And I hope there are opportunities for him coming forward. Maybe if that is as a substitute to see out games. I don't think there will be many starts, but I do hope he gets some time on the pitch because he deserves it. His attitude is absolutely impeccable.
We're focused on the one positive. I want to focus on a couple of the negatives now, because there was an article on Anfield Index this morning you can go and read, and it almost sort of the three standouts of players that we probably expected a bit more from yesterday that never delivered. And I think the biggest disappointment for me is not so much going out the cup. It's that these guys that were probably the fringe players that were hoping to impress Arne Slot to try and get a bit more game time in this crunch part of the season have kind of let themselves down. And I think you could talk about Harvey Elliott in that respect. You could talk about Federico Chiesa, and you could probably talk about Diogo Jota as well. I mean, Jota is just coming back, so I think he's the easiest. But I think he was the poorest out of the players. I know he had that really good shot, but nothing worked for him. It was like he couldn't find his feet. I mean, you would think a senior pro with all his quality and international star, you think part of his mentality would be, right, we're struggling in midfield. I'm just going to drop a little bit deeper. I'm going to try running at players a bit more and try and make things happen, try and free up the spaces. I mean, their fullbacks were absolutely goosed. I mean, they had to put their right back up front in the end because of the cramp that he was suffering. They have no more subs to use. You think Liverpool, when that 9-minute board went up for all that added time, you'd have thought that street smart players would have thought, right, this is our chance to really grab this bull by the horns. And it never really happened. They still tried to go centrally. They were still trying pot shots. I mean, even Jota's one that forced a brilliant save from the keeper. It was still an incredible shot, to be honest, but it was still a shot from the outside box. They never really carved Plymouth open at any point. And I know no matter who you're playing against, it's always difficult to play against a deep block. But Liverpool never really seemed to exploit the weaknesses. And it wasn't as if Slot was on the sideline trying to encourage that either, which was a bit strange, I thought, because it was almost like a gimme in some ways to try and exploit these weaknesses, but it never really happened. And I think that's a disappointment for me, certainly with Diogo Jota. In terms of Chiesa, his performance was poor as well. We can't beat around the bush. I mean, again, his control wasn't there. His touch wasn't there. You just kind of sense the vibe from him as, I really want to be here. You know what I mean? That was the impression I got. And I know Slot defended them afterwards and said that there was no lack of effort and things. And it's hard to quantify lack of effort with lack of quality effort, if you like. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that there was no effort. Of course there's effort. They're professional footballers. They play with pride. They play for Liverpool. It's a given. But the point with those guys was it didn't seem like they had the effort to make the quality decisions that were going to carve Plymouth apart. Plymouth. In terms of Harvey Elliott, again, disappointing. And I've already mentioned his position. Again, his touch was dreadful. His passing was awful. And it just didn't come off for him. And I know Dave Hendrick's taken some stick on this channel in the past for his views on Harvey Elliott, saying that if he had a chance as a part of his, he would try and sell Elliott this summer because it would bring in money that Liverpool could use to deploy in areas that would be more to Slot's advantage in terms of how he redevelops his squad, because he doesn't see a long-term role for Harvey Elliott. We know he's not going to be a right winger because he doesn't have the pace for that. Liverpool don't play with a 10 alongside a striker, and it's unlikely in a Slot system that's ever going to happen. And Harvey Elliott, for all is good on the ball usually, he's no Dominic Szoboszlai off the ball. So where is Elliott's future? You know what I mean? It's great to say he's a lovely lad. He's a Liverpool boy. He said in that interview after the Champions League game against Lille a couple of weeks ago that he's not going anywhere, and he gave the gesture and all this sort of stuff. But where do you see Elliott's future with Liverpool here?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I have to say, over the last couple of performances, I'm getting a little bit concerned about that. I will say, from Elliot's side of things, absolutely, you know, the things he said in that post-match interview are spot on in terms of the player himself is absolutely determined to stay, no desire to go out elsewhere. He is a massive Liverpool supporter and he wants to make it work, but been a tough season for him so far. That injury was really poorly timed, and I just think since he's come back, he hasn't quite looked himself, really. You know, he was one of many really who struggled yesterday, but I thought the PSV performance, even with him kind of, you know, in that game influencing it, I've seen him play much better. And I just think his kind of touch looks off at times, his range of passing. You know, he's usually so good at those little cute moments, and that's where he kind of made. You know, he was so important for Liverpool last season in doing that, but he just hasn't looked quite there this season. And you do wonder in terms of, you know, does he have a place in this system? He's so different to Szoboszlai. Does that really count against him in terms of getting regular starts? I suppose the counterpoint is he's so young, isn't he, still? And the fact he's played the amount of minutes and he's got the experience he does already, you'd like to think that you can get more out of him, and that you know, he will sort of knock these rough edges off his game that we've seen a little bit more of this season. But I will say, you know, when those initial reports came out about selling him, I was very, very skeptical about them. Whereas now I'm kind of feeling that, you know, I don't know, it doesn't seem outside of the realm of possibility to me, because I think he's coming up to 2 years from the end of his contract this summer, and that's a big kind of decision time. And, you know, Liverpool are either going to have to sell him or tie him down to a new one. So I've got more doubts about it than I did 2 or 3 months ago, and yeah, I just hope for his sake. I hope he can. I don't think he's going to play very much over the remainder of this season, because the starts aren't going to be there for him. So I just hope he can, when he goes back to being a kind of substitute, a super sub in the Premier League, that seems to suit him quite nicely. So I just hope that there are a few more decent performances for him, maybe to come as a sub, and then we come to the end of the season feeling a little bit better about it. And yeah, hopefully then a new contract, and he can kind of just iron it out and go into it next season and be fresh and maybe have a better impact. Because then just this season feels a little bit cursed for him, and he was without question very, very poor yesterday.
Now, I want to talk about this comment that's on the screen just now, because it's one that will divide opinion. And I think what David and I have just done there is very constructively talk about the weak points in the Liverpool squad there. But I think this is a little bit hyperbole to, I mean, we'll criticize FSG when they need to be criticized. I do it all the time, certainly on social media. But I think that it's very, very difficult to take a squad like that, where the manager's made a distinct decision to field the team that he's had, to leave the players at home that he's had, and blame the owners for that. You know what I mean? It's like Liverpool, none of us expected Liverpool to be where they are right now at the start of the season. None of us. Not a Liverpool fan, not a Liverpool journalist like David, no one. So to get knocked out of the FA Cup, which is almost done with a lot of baggage in the terms of what the manager decided to do there, to say that Liverpool aren't equipped to challenge on four fronts is probably fair, but it's equally, I don't think it's the time. I don't think it's the time to blame that specific case on a blessing in disguise because the owners didn't invest in the market. Okay, perhaps we could have used another defender, another centre half, so that Endo didn't have to go back there. But then where is Quansah getting any minutes? You know what I mean? If you bring in another defender now, and they're still trying to establish whether Quansah has a Liverpool future or not. So I think it's very, very difficult to blame anything to do with recruitment or ownership on this one. The manager made a distinct choice to take a young side with some fringe players. That was his decision. So that's not like he didn't have the option to do that. He could have done, and Liverpool could have won that tie. But these are the breaks that you get. I mean, I think that's quite harsh, to be honest. And there's going to be recruitment shows, there's going to be transfer shows where, on this channel in particular, we do not have club access. You know what I mean? It's not something that we have. We are perfectly prepared to criticize the ownership, to criticize the recruitment, to criticize anyone at Liverpool Football Club when we have to. So you could say you beg to differ, but give me your reasons for that. What are your reasons for that? Because it's not logical. I've just tried to explain the logic in it. Maybe David can help me out a bit here. And I know David often gets accused of all sorts of things to do with FSG, but am I being unreasonable here, David?
My thing on this as well is that the 1 January signing I probably would have liked to see more than any other was left back. I don't think it's going to cost Liverpool in the league, because I think the lead is too great there. But I think if Andy Robertson has one of those poor games in a Champions League knockout tie, that could cost Liverpool. So left back would have been the area to strengthen. But of course, if they had signed a left back in the January window, he wouldn't have been in the squad yesterday. He would have been left out entirely. So, we can't talk. That would have been, okay, the squad's been backed, but he would have been left out yesterday. It would have made absolutely no difference. And it's almost like a crutch sometimes as well, that the blaming the owners about this, because the money's there for signings. If the football staff had decided they wanted to make a signing in the January window, I can promise you now this would have absolutely would 100% have happened. It would have. It's not. He's calling John Henry, and John Henry saying, "I'm not willing to release the funds." There's no situation like that going on, and I think sometimes, because maybe people don't want to blame the manager for the selection he made, or don't think that the decision he made was right yesterday. It's just so much easier to blame the owners for it. The fact is, the manager made a call on what that squad was going to look like, and no amount of depth can salvage this. And I will also say as well, Liverpool aren't equipped to win all 4 trophies in the way that no club has ever been equipped to do that. It hasn't happened for a good reason. You have to make really difficult decisions around what squads look like for games like this, and it'll happen. So I just think, I don't know, I find that kind of logic hard to get my head around. And I would also say as well, in terms of if people think the squad is going to be deeper next summer because signings will be made now, it's going to be in fact, I can guarantee this now, it's going to be 1 in, 1 out in terms of the numbers that looks like. You may add more quality, but you're going to be swapping Joe Gomez for someone. You're going to be swapping Darwin Núñez for someone. The numbers will not be bigger. And I don't think Liverpool will ever carry 5 centre-halves, which is an obsession that people have got. I think they're only going to ever carry 4 because they have 2 fullbacks on either side. So it's not going to be deeper than this. It might have more quality, but in terms of numbers, it's not going to be bigger. And this is how it is, and this is why the quadruple is extremely hard to win, and may never be done.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I know that Cromwell is making further comments here about how we must continuously improve the squad, but I think that's not something that can be done on a small sample size, Cromwell. I think that what we've got here is a manager that's come in with a new recruitment team. Don't forget, everyone left. They were all gone in the summer. You know what I mean? So it was like Arne Slot needed to assess the players. Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards, they needed to reestablish themselves to see what the contracts were. I don't think it's a case of not continuously improving the squad. They will improve the squad. And like David said, they had the option. If they wanted to, they could have done something in January. They decided not to. So, and I know you're saying the 3 important contracts aren't signed. Yes, absolutely. I remember David saying throughout the whole autumn, I listen to the show every single week. I remember David saying throughout the whole autumn, the time to panic is in January, not now. That was in September, October, November, December. The time to panic is in January. Well, we're now in February, and there's nothing on these contracts. But David doesn't seem to be panicking. So read into that what you will, but I don't think that's because these things aren't being done or because nothing's going to happen. Remember, the club are under no obligation to tell us as fans or David as a journalist what's going on. You know what I mean? It's all part of a business operation that they're running to try and get the best, in their opinion, for Liverpool Football Club. So we can jump up and down about the little tidbits we hear every now and then, but none of us really have a full picture. And I think that came out last week when it broke all over. I think Anfield Edition and a couple of the other social media platforms, Indie Kylers of this world and such, were Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah have agreed, announcement imminent. Then literally the journalist at the end of the game asks Virgil van Dijk and he says, no, nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like these things. And I think Virgil said himself, he said that anyone that says they know is lying effectively. You know what I mean? So it's like, no one really knows. And if people did know, it would be the likes of David and his colleagues that would find these things out. That's their job. That's what they do. And everyone's saying, they're holding news back and stuff like that. Again, a scoop is God to journalists. David Ornstein lives on this stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like, if there was an opportunity to print something like that, even on the most sparse of information, then that's these guys' lifeblood. That's what they would do. So it's not like these things are happening. It's a social media inflated fantasy, and that's the problem that you've got. These deals may be close, but until there's actually something concrete to throw out there into the ether, then that's not going to happen. And that, as I say, I think it's very harsh to slam this loss on the recruitment, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I know Cromwell's made his, and that's fair enough. You know what I mean? That's your opinion. We won't dwell on this too much longer. I don't know if you have anything else to add on those comments, David, before we speak about a few other bits.
I would just say that every time a team loses, and this is my experience, everyone talks about recruitment constantly as if it's the only reason a defeat has ever happened. I just never really buy into that, and I don't think Arne Slot would agree in the slightest. So if you're talking to the guy who's the Liverpool manager, he would wholeheartedly disagree if you put that to him, and that would be even behind closed doors. So, that's kind of how it is, really.
Yeah, I like this comment that's actually just come in. It's a bit of a long one, and I'm going to read this because I thought about this morning on my dog walk, and I was thinking back to everyone saying, Klopp being replaced by Slot is akin to Paisley being replaced by Paisley replacing Shankly, and it dawned on me there that there is a bit of a sliding doors moment there, because Paisley never won the FA Cup, and that's probably the most successful Liverpool team of all. They never won the FA Cup under Bob Paisley. And this chap said here, Mojo17, I grew up with the team in the 70s and 80s, small squad playing every game like it was a cup final, but nowadays we have to give up the cup to concentrate on the cup. That sounds like a whole woke thinking, to be honest. The last time refs offer even less or no protection and yet weak mentality. You can ask the first team players if they prefer to rest and be kicked out of the FA Cup or play. You mean we could not play Verge, Gravmo and a spine that play the young ones around them? I understand the hype up. I guess his comments cut off there. But again, with that one, I just don't see it. I mean, I just don't see that going out the FA Cup is this big thing to the manager, because he showed his hand. He didn't want the FA Cup was not unimportant. It became the fourth of the priorities to him. And I'm not saying, again, I'll underline this, I'm not saying, again, the manager wanted to lose that game. Of course he didn't. No player, professionally or otherwise, wants to lose a football match. But he played his dice the way he and sort of stacked his cards the way he chose to. That was his choice, and he earned that right. So unless you're jumping up and down about Arne Slot, I don't think there's anyone else to blame for that, because that's his decision. And that's made probably with the sports scientists and with the players. Let's not pretend the players aren't involved in that as well, because that will have all been discussed to them. You want Mo Salah now to go and play 5 Premier League games in 15 games. What if he'd had to play 90? What if he'd had to play 120 minutes yesterday? You know what I mean? What impact does that have on the players and the knock-on effect? And let's move on to talk about some other bits now. And still on the fallout from yesterday's game, obviously Joe Gomez limped off there, David, and it looked like it might have been a reoccurrence of the injury, but Arne Slot wasn't even sure if it was the same leg, and he said he didn't think it was a tear. Have you heard anything in the interim since the game yesterday that suggests what might have happened to Joe Gomez?
No, all quiet at the moment. He'll undergo a scan today to have a look at that and find out a little bit more. And it's interesting. I thought Arne in the post match was kind of, not necessarily playing it down, but he kind of said that, it's one of those where he felt that if he did another sprint, it would get worse. So, you hope that by taking that precaution and getting him off early, that we're talking a minor strain rather than anything worse, and that, maybe it could be a couple of weeks or so, but we will have to just learn more today when he undergoes that scan, and fingers crossed. I mean, the one thing you would say about him is that, in terms of him limping out, it's not the worst injury blow Liverpool could suffer. I mean, he's third choice centre-half, third choice fullback on either side. But obviously you want a Liverpool squad that's got Joe Gomez in it because he's so versatile, and Liverpool doing so well with injuries, and you wanted them to keep that up. So it is a real shame. And yeah, I'd like to think that they've caught that early enough that it's not going to turn into anything serious. But of course, we'll get an update from Arne tomorrow when he will have had the scan and hopefully learn a bit more then.
I mean, my concern with it is I'm more concerned about Quansah than anything else, to be honest, because he was one that I had massive hopes for, like most Liverpool fans going into the season. We heard that Liverpool had rejected an opportunity to have him included in any potential deal that may have metastasized for Anthony Gordon, and everyone was like, no way. There was even talk he may start the season ahead of Ibrahima Konate, which now you think about is absolutely mind-blowing. But it's one of those, I do have concerns about the lad, and it's not just a confidence thing. It's some of the physicality, some of the athleticism that we're seeing. It just doesn't seem like he's the same player from last season. I know a lot of that can stem back to confidence and the way that obviously was substituted in that first game against Ipswich. But I'm starting to wonder about the lad, and I'm starting to worry about him. I'm starting, like you were saying about Harvey Elliott, I'm starting to worry that the player that we hoped would be there perhaps isn't. And again, we'll take it back to what you said about Elliott as well. He is young. He's got time on his side. There's plenty of room, and centre-halves don't tend to develop till much later. He's well ahead of the curve. But are you having the same concerns about Quansah? And if Virgil van Dijk or Ibrahima Konate were to get injured now, I'd almost be thinking, as long as it wasn't playing against a big tool side, I'd almost prefer Endo to be in there.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Quansah, I have to say. I think he's getting a lot of scrutiny for his performances this season, where in moments where I don't think he necessarily deserves it. I mean, as much as Plymouth played well yesterday and I thought defended fantastically well, they weren't creating a hatful of chances. And it's not like Quansah was, for me, at the scene of the crime of several terrible moments. I mean, there's a couple of duels he kind of lost out on where you thought they might have done better there. But it's like you say, so much of being a centre-half is down to experience. And, for him to have played to have played as many minutes as he has at his age and be around the squad at this young age in such in a position like that, I still think he's a top young defender. And it's kind of interesting to me that you don't have to defend big spaces as much under Arne Slot as you did under Jurgen Klopp, and yet he arguably looked better last season than he has this season. But I guess that's all kind of the peaks and troughs of development of a young defender. And I didn't think he did too poorly at all. Particularly, I would say the forwards were much worse than anything Quansah did in the game yesterday. And like I say, Liverpool didn't give up many chances at all, really. And Quansah certainly wasn't to blame. I just think he's getting a lot of scrutiny at the moment that is maybe a little bit unfair. And I do wonder whether some of it kind of comes from the fact that there's this desperation to sign a defender or whatever, and that's kind of driving it a little bit. I mean, it'd be interesting to see, we'll find out really what Slot truly thinks about him this summer in terms of whether they do any business in that area, outside of Joe Gomez leaving, which is the expectation. That will be interesting to see. But for me, I feel like it's a little bit unfair on him sometimes. I think he's had some decent performances this season. Not least, by the way, Lille quite recently, where I thought he was outstanding.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to move on to talk about the story that Sam Maguire, formerly of Anfield Index, many of you will know Sam and his work, obviously, with Anfield Watch now. And Sam broke a story on Friday evening as an exclusive, and I'll put that air quotes around that one. And it was focusing on Diaz, Nunes potentially leaving, and some question marks over Diogo Jota's future as well. So I need to ask if you've heard anything about that first and foremost on the club side. And it's ironic that the three of those players all struggled yesterday a bit as well, and none of them really put their mark on that game at Plymouth. And I just wondered if it was anything you had come across in dispatches.
Yeah, so I wouldn't quite say this in as concrete terms as these three players are up for sale this summer. I don't think that's how Liverpool are approaching it. I mean, I wrote something on Substack last week, which is kind of a summary of what is likely to happen this summer, what that's going to look like for Liverpool. And a couple of these I mentioned. I mean, Darwin Núñez, there was big interest in January, particularly from Saudi clubs. Didn't quite get as far as a bid going in, but there were inquiries made and he was asked about. Liverpool kind of shot that down straight away. They didn't want to sell him in the middle of the season because he has got a role to play for them. But that is, when it gets to the summer, it's quite clear. It's not worked out as well as everybody hoped. He's not an absolutely perfect fit for what the manager wants. And he's probably worth quite a bit of money as well. So Liverpool can get back a chunk of what they paid. I think there's a willingness from his side to go as well in terms of he can be the starting number 9 somewhere. So I'd say it's not necessarily that he's up for sale and Liverpool will get rid no matter what. But I very much can see a world where he departs this summer. In fact, I go as far as to say I expect that will happen, that Núñez will go this summer. And in terms of the other two, Luis Diaz, again, he's coming up to that point where he's 2 years out from the end of his contract. There's big interest in him from clubs in Spain. And so, that is, again, it's just, you're in the realms of possibility. Liverpool are not at the point where they're going to try and ship him out and get rid. But I'd say his future is very much in doubt. And it would not surprise me at all if he were to go. He's not quite in that Núñez factor if I expect him to go, but it would not surprise me at all because I don't necessarily expect that Liverpool will offer him a new contract. And with Jota, I think the one thing that stands against the possibility of selling him is, one, that the other two are more likely to go, and therefore you're talking about incredible churn, which Liverpool probably like to avoid. But also, in terms of the interest in him, his injury record is a massive factor. It's probably going to hurt Liverpool in terms of getting the fee that they would think is acceptable for him. So for me, he's also going to be 2 years out, and you're in that decision-making period. But I think Liverpool, with Jota, because they paid a decent fee for him, and not too much, and his injury record is a factor, and there's going to be that churn there. My expectation around Jota is they probably see him as one where it's not the worst thing in the world if he runs down the next 2 years of his contract. You keep him round as an option. He scores a few goals for you, wins a few trophies. I think that will kind of be the aim with him, really. I'd be surprised if he's sold this summer.
Yeah, me also. I mean, I think that you're in that situation with Diaz and Jota. You think it's going to be either or. It's certainly not going to be both. I'd be very shocked if it was both. Obviously, there are concerns about Jota's fitness, and that's always going to be there. Diaz doesn't really have that worry, but equally, that probably gives Diaz more of a value in the transfer market than. I mean, who's going to come and realistically now? I know there's an answer to this. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate, but who realistically is going to come and buy Diogo Jota? But there will be clubs, of course, but which one of those clubs is Diogo Jota going to be happy with? You know what I mean? It's not there's not going to be a big market for him. Whereas his best bet, even in terms of not Liverpool not offering him a contract and him not demanding one, is that, like what David says, if he was to play out this time, then he's got a chance to try and get fit, to try and score goals, to try and be a regular again for Liverpool, and then his options open up far more in free agency in 2 years' time. Whereas with Diaz, he's never had the pay bump. He's never had the new contract. He's probably feels he's worth that and not achieved it. And Liverpool don't seem intent particularly to offer him a contract that to his liking. Again, I'm just speculating here. That's not based on any info or anything that I've heard. And obviously we've had his father, we've had his camp continuously drumming up stuff that may suggest that the player would fancy sunnier climes, shall we say, perhaps La Liga or maybe Saudi or one of these things. Has been links to all of them in the future. So I can see Liverpool, and Liverpool aren't weak in that area. Obviously, Gakpo has dislodged Diaz as the starting left winger. So, and obviously we do have Chiesa who can play over there as well. He signed a long contract. I'm not saying he's going to stay next season as well, but you do wonder if there's something in that. And as for Núñez, again, Liverpool be mad not to cash in on him this summer because it's clearly not working. No matter what anyone says, it's just not working. You know what I mean? I know his link-up play with Salah can be good and there's things like that, but you've got a chance. Again, his contract is going to run down and Liverpool aren't likely to offer him a new one. And if there is a criticism of the first incarnation of the Michael Edwards era, and I don't think it's a criticism many deliver at Michael Edwards, it seems to be more delivered at Jurgen Klopp's door, but there seem to be so many players leaving them free as free agents in a club that has a model where the owners don't put money in. Where does the money come from? You know what I mean? You have to sell players, I've seen some comments come up there. I would like us to buy 4 players this summer, but where's that money coming from? We know Liverpool have money, but of course the problem with Liverpool is if they keep allowing these contracts to run down, then that sustainable model is threatened every single time you allow that to happen. And whilst it's great to have these players coming on at the pitch, the last game of the season, showing them the nice frames with all their great moments, wishing them well, singing songs, letting them say goodbye and go around murals in the streets and all that sort of stuff. Really, that's not how you run a sustainable recruitment model at a club like Liverpool, is it?
No, exactly. That's it. I think they do need to get kind of better at those sales. And I just think there's a distinct possibility to do that this summer. Not, you look at Núñez and Diaz, and they are just real candidates to go on that basis, really. And it's quite easy for me to see as well. I know they get shared all the time, the graphics of Liverpool's net spend versus the top 6. And I keep thinking, it's probably going to look pretty similar to that after this summer as well, because I think Liverpool are going to make some pretty decent sales, and I think Liverpool can improve this squad even with that happening. I mean, you think of the amount that you could get. Say Luis Diaz goes to a Barcelona, or he could go to Saudi as well. I believe there's interest there. Darwin Núñez goes to Saudi. You get Joe Gomez making a move to a big Premier League side. That's a lot of money you could be making there. And you could, with that then, to retool the squad and add players who are more of a fit in terms of the profile. I think Liverpool could do a lot to the squad with a very, very low net spend this summer. And as you say, it's important to do that if you're a team who's not spending like a Manchester City or whatever. So the money's there. Liverpool don't necessarily need to make the sales to make the signings. But I think because the kind of squad size-wise are one in, one out, they can do it with a very, very low net spend this summer. So I think it's going to be a decent summer for that. And the manager will get a chance to really put his stamp on the squad, but he doesn't have to go push the boat out in terms of spending money to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I see some of the comments coming in. Thanks for all the comments. Obviously, they do help us make the show, and it's really good to read some of them. But I do agree with this comment that's on the screen just now. I mean, really, it makes me think, here we are with all our problems at the top of all the leagues and in the cup final. You know what I mean? It's like, but we have to talk about something, and that's what that's the way the news cycle works. So that's why we're talking about these things, because these are stories that are breaking, and it's our job to cover those. But I do sense the irony in some of these discussions, because it is laughable at times. I do accept that. So let's talk about the big one, and it's only it's 2.5 days away now is the final Goodison's last stand, the final Merseyside derby. Before we talk about the game, what are your recollections being a local of Goodison Park, David? And obviously a grand old stadium, and the old lady will sing one last time for a derby, and it is now the last time. The two teams have both gone out the FA Cup. Everton disappeared early in the League Cup, so this is the last time that there will be a Merseyside derby at Goodison. That's now been confirmed after this weekend. So, what are your recollections of the stadium and going back through the archives, your memories of the place?
Yes, I've got really good memories of Everton. I've done a lot of reporting on them down the years. I've not just been a Liverpool reporter. I've done an awful lot of Everton. My first game I ever reported on was a cup game at Everton as well. So that's, getting on for nearly 14 years ago now, so a long time ago. So I absolutely love the place. Quite sympathetic towards Everton. My dad's an Evertonian, and my mum's a Red, so that's how I was quite fortunate with how I landed in terms of which team I ended up supporting, thankfully. But but I have a lot of affection for Everton because it's always a great place to go, and the staff there are so kind, and it's just run by great people. And they're just unfortunate they're on the wrong side of that Merseyside divide in terms of winning trophies, but they are great people and great fans, and it's always a really good atmosphere as well, and particularly for these derbies. So it's a magic place, and I genuinely will miss it when it's gone, and I think the Premier League will miss it because you're losing these great iconic stadiums, aren't you, one by one. I mean, I remember going to the Berlin ground the last season that was open, and that's now gone. Highbury's gone. All these iconic places, Filbert Street for Leicester, these are great grounds that we're not seeing anymore, and Goodison is one of the last of those. So it's I'll be really, really sad to see Everton move on, but I totally understand as well. It's the right decision for them to make, and the new stadium I'm sure will be fantastic.
And I'm sure being local again, you'll have driven down past that new stadium a few times. And I've only seen it once, and it was a few weeks ago, and it was quite impressive. I've not been in, but it looks like quite a special new place they've found for themselves. And to be honest, I don't mind so much they're not going to be right on our doorstep anymore. I mean, I'm sure some of the local businesses won't enjoy that so much, but I always park over that way normally and walk through the park to Anfield. So I'm used to seeing Goodison quite a lot. I've not been to a match there. The last match I was there was in 1988, so I'm showing my age there, and it was when Liverpool went on that 29 game run to try and go ahead of Leeds United, and of course it was Wayne Clark, the son of a Leeds player in that run, Alan Clark, that got the goal that deprived Liverpool of that particular record. And I swore that day I would never go back, and I've had chances to go back to Goodison, and I was 12 years old at that point, and I've never made it to another game at Goodison in all that time, and had offers, but I'd never done so. And this game could have been played obviously a few weeks ago. The winds saw the back of it. It never happened because of the winds. But it's now given Everton the chance for an evening kickoff, which means the old lady will be rocking. Whereas it may not have been quite the case had it been a few weeks ago. But I still think Liverpool would prefer to play a David Moyes team over a Sean Dyche team. And they'd prefer to play with a hostile crowd, which they'd expect anyway, rather than in blustery, windy, gale force conditions that probably equalise things a bit more for Everton than they do to benefit Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that, no matter what the result ends up being, I think this is a better timing that this has landed in for Liverpool than the original, because in those conditions, it would have just been absolute chaos. So, you saw some of the results over that weekend actually were a little bit wonky, and some big sides got shocked. So the conditions can really level things. So I think Liverpool will be glad it is when it is. And as you say, probably more glad to be facing a Moyes team than a Dyche one, because he seemed to kind of, he had a decent record, didn't he, against Liverpool and making it really hard for them, whereas Moyes hasn't necessarily. And also, that new manager bounce that Everton have got kind of came to a little bit of an end in the Bournemouth game as well. So not too bad timing in terms of that. So, the atmosphere is going to be absolutely feral, as it always is in these derbies at Goodison. It's always so tricky because the fans are close to the pitch and they'll make it difficult. But I think for Liverpool, fully rested squad now coming into this, no excuse not to match Everton for physicality. And then if they do that, they should give themselves the basis to play the football, and Liverpool are without doubt the better team here. So, I think in terms of how it's fallen for them, the fact they've got all that rest, I don't think there's any excuses for Liverpool not to go there and put on a decent performance and hopefully get a win. And if they do that, 9 points clear, then it's a long way back for Arsenal.
I mean, we did see a horror show there towards the end of last season. It was probably Liverpool's worst performance of last season. But it did come with mitigation. It came in a point where Liverpool's season had collapsed, had fallen apart. And as much as Everton fans will say, "Oh, we deprived Liverpool of the title was long gone by that day," only mathematically it is at stake there. But it's that was a disappointing performance, as I say, but this season should give Liverpool hope. What are you expecting in terms of the lineup and the score forecast then for this? Because I'm guessing we don't know quite about Trent yet, and Bradley was rested for that trip to Plymouth, so I'm expecting Bradley starts. But other than that, are we pretty much going to be expected? I guess number 9 as well is a question there, but I think the rest of the team picks itself.
Yeah, I'd agree. Really, I think he kind of telegraphed what the lineup was going to be outside of maybe that number 9 decision. That will be an interesting one because obviously Diaz gets the whole game there, and Núñez only comes on as a sub. So does that tell us anything in terms of he wants that number 9 presence and that physicality that Núñez brings? That'll be an interesting one. But yeah, I think with Conor Bradley is nailed on for right back now, isn't he? Because there was always that. I think with Trent, even though he may be back in the squad for this one, you just don't take the risk with a muscle injury, do you? And do you know what? I actually think that might fall in Liverpool's favour, that one as well, because it's going to be that type of game where I'm not against Conor Bradley being there. I don't think it's maybe a game you're going to completely dominating possession and all about showing you football. It's probably going to be a bit of a fight, and they've got Njai playing down that left hand side. He's probably their biggest threat. I'm not too gutted about the fact it's going to be Conor Bradley up against him because he tends to lock down whoever he's up against. So that one may work in Liverpool's favour. And I just think, like I say, with the amount of rest this squad's had now, he can bounce into this. He can run all over Everton, and if you like I say, if you match them for the physicality, then the quality should be there to make the difference. And so every confidence really that Liverpool will put in a decent performance and win.
And what about the number 9, David? What do you think he'll do there? I noticed that Tony Horse said in the comments there that he'd go Jota as the 9 as he's more clinical than Darwin, but I actually think that Slot will stick the course and go with Diaz.
Yeah, I just wonder with Núñez being on the bench yesterday whether that sort of tells you anything in terms of what he's planning there. I mean, it shows that he's not nailed on in his head about what he wanted to do. The fact that both of those players went down there, I think that's interesting. Very much in some of the games where he's had rotation chances. For example, the PSV game where he uses both Robertson and Tsimikas because left back is kind of in his mind as much of a muchness. I think it was kind of a little bit like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think the Diaz number 9 thing, I think for teams that kind of try and play it out from the back is maybe it's more suited to that because it's trying to press and nick the ball off them. Whereas a team that's going to be direct like Everton definitely will. Maybe you need Núñez because of the fact he's a physical focal point up front, and maybe that will help Liverpool in a direct game. So I'm kind of leaning towards him going down with Núñez there, which and his recent performances, I think I'm not against at all. I think we have seen some improvement in his working build up. His pressing's been really good as well, and he's not the guy who gets all the shots in this system either, which helps him because you don't see as much of his wayward finishing. So I'm probably leaning towards Núñez in that position, I think.
Yeah, I don't expect it, but I agree with you. So I still expect we'll see Diaz because that just seems to be Slot's strongest lineup in his own mind. So that's what I expect to happen. But I agree with you. I would play Núñez as well, and perhaps there is a hint there. Let's wait and see. And can we tease a score prediction out of you for this one?
Yeah, like I say, I'm kind of confident going into this one, and I rarely am really about Liverpool going to Goodison Park, but I think that rest will really help them to match Everton. So. I think a solid 2-0 win is my expectation, which, by the way, would mean Liverpool have got a winning record at Goodison Park historically, which is absolutely incredible. So, yeah, so they're even going into this one for wins, and if Liverpool win it, obviously they will have won more derbies at Goodison Park than Everton. So it's
that on the dressing room wall.
A lot riding on this one.
Well, that's pretty much us, guys. We've covered obviously all the subjects there. We've kept David busy with thanks to Dave Davis, who came up with this agenda. He's on holiday, but he still sent us this bright and early this morning. So that's the first thing I saw in my mailbox at about 6:30 a.m. So Dave wasn't going to let the children run away with it. He made sure that the grown-ups in the room gave us something to speak about. So thanks to Dave for that. I do hope you're having a great holiday. Now, Dave won't be back on Thursday. It'll be me again. It'll be me and myself and David to discuss the Merseyside derby. We'll hope that David's prediction comes off, because that would be a lovely position. And in the title race, David, you said a long time back, actually, that you saw Liverpool's leaders almost being unassailable already based on what Arsenal needed to do to topple Liverpool. And it's not the be all and end all. I heard Chris Khan say on one of the shows with Gags last week that in this next 5 and 15 days, this Premier League, Liverpool can't really lose the league in these games, but they could win it. Would you agree with Grizz on that?
Yeah, totally agree with that. That's it. If they come out with a kind of a decent points to haul out of this, and it doesn't have to be 5 wins by any means, because Arsenal are just nowhere near, and they will drop points themselves. But I think if they come out with a decent points tally out of it, I mean, if 4 wins and out of 5 would absolutely, I just think would absolutely nail down the fact that the league is done, because you struggle to see from that point onwards, because it's so many tricky fixtures in there as well. You're struggling to find where Liverpool would drop that amount of points, and the fact is you'd be 5 further games towards the finishing line as well. There's just not.
They're running out of road.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think as you say, they could just nail it down. Which again, if they do that, what a chance that gives them in the Champions League as well, in terms of, because if they already feel that the Premier League is stitched up, you can really point everything towards that. So yeah, it's an exciting run to be at the start of. But obviously the priority is, and this is what the manager will be saying, is win the next game. And if Liverpool do that, they're 9 points clear coming into this big run. It's really exciting times.
And dare I say now, viewers, Reds all around the world, if that happens, what David has just described there, Liverpool nail down this league in the next 5 games. They strengthen their hand going into the Champions League. They strengthen their position going into this cup final against Newcastle. Is anyone really going to be thinking about Plymouth yesterday? So it's one of those. We take it as Reds. We're even going out the FA Cup doesn't make it any less truth, and there's never been a better time to be a Red, and that is the case. We're on the crest of a wave here, and we're all enjoying it, and we enjoy putting out this content. We're really doing. You could keep in touch with Anfield Index in many ways. Obviously, we've got YouTube, which is growing all the time. We're on all the social medias. You've got 600 or so articles a month free on AnfieldIndex.com, and there's almost 100 podcasts a month on audio as well over at AnfieldIndex.com. So please do keep it tuned to what we're doing. We're going to keep bringing you the content. We're excited to do so in these runs. It's far better talking about it when so much is on the line, rather than the seasons where things just peter away about now, and going out the FA Cup doesn't really change that. So all that remains for me to do is to thank the wonderful David Lynch for his contributions today, and David will be back, as I said, with me on Thursday. Thank you, David.
No, thanks for having me, and I hope I'm not blaming you for another defeat after Wednesday night.
Don't even joke about that, because my wife's already thrown that at me this week. It's like Dave Davis isn't going to be able to take time off ever again if that happens. That's it. All holiday requests rejected. So until next time, up the Reds.